Marion Military Institute was established in 1842. Residing in Marion, Alabama, Marion Military Institute is one of only 4 military junior colleges in the United States and has become the official state military college of Alabama. Since its creation in 1842, it has seen its fair share of death and bloodshed prior to becoming the staple of education that it is today.
Marion Military Institute traces its origins back to 1842 with the creation of Howard College in Marion, Alabama by the Alabama Baptist Convention. During the Civil War, the South Barracks, which were built in 1854, later renamed to Lovelace Hall, and the chapel, built in 1857, served as Breckinridge Military Hospital for the Confederacy from 1863 to 1865. Regardless of your beliefs on the Civil War, all military men and women wish to return home to their loved ones.
For those unfortunate soldiers who did not survive their stay in the hospital, they were buried behind the chapel. Since that time, there have been reports of strange occurrences, including mysterious noises emanating from the hallways and objects mysteriously moving and vanishing from rooms. Some cadets have reported strange feelings, as though someone were nearby, when in fact, they were alone. As we all know, war isn't pretty, even in the modern day and age. Though back in the 1800s, the loss of life from inadequate medical technology was immeasurable. Limbs amputated with hacksaws and rubbing alcohol, as the screams of the infected bind themselves to the walls of the hospital. The muffled groans of war-torn bodies and shell-shocked soldiers lingering in the halls of the Marion Institute.
As the seemingly never-ending cycle of soldiers going from bandaged to buried during what some have called the War Born of Hate. In 1887, the decision was made to move Howard College to Birmingham. The then president of Howard College, Colonel J.T. Murphy, decided to remain in Marion, Alabama, and immediately reorganized and founded the Marion Military Institute. For better or for worse, this institute remained where it was, and throughout the years has seen new horrors created out of old wounds.
On the morning of April 2nd, 1865, Lieutenant General Nathan Bedford Forrest could muster no more than 4,000 soldiers, many of whom were old men and boys who lacked any military experience, to garrison Selma's defenses. Soldiers stationed along the front positions were separated from their nearest comrade in arms by a distance of several yards, as Selma's defenses had been designed to be manned by 20,000 soldiers. Forrest knew that the city could not be defended and advised Lieutenant General Richard Taylor, the ranking Confederate officer in the region, to evacuate. While Taylor began the evacuation, Wilson divided his command into 3 columns and arrived outside of Selma's defenses that afternoon.
As the Federal soldiers approached Selma, one column came under attack in their rear supply chain by Forrest's troops. In aiming to avoid a disruption of the larger attack plan, Brigadier General James H. Wilson of the Federal Army launched a frontal assault on the Confederate stronghold. U.S. soldiers armed with 7-shot Spencer repeating carbines overpowered the Confederate resistance, which was armed mostly with muskets and had low ammunition. The poorly supplied and trained Confederates then fought hand to hand against the Federal lines as they breached the city's outer defenses in less than 30 minutes of fighting.
Groups of retreating Confederates, led by Forrest, occupied the city's inner defense lines and briefly slowed the Federal advance, only to be swept aside by a series of cavalry charges. After setting fire to more than 25,000 bales of cotton and protected only by darkness, hundreds of Confederates, including Forrest, fled the city, while others swam across the Alabama River to escape capture. During the Battle of Selma, the Confederate numbers of 4,000 turned into an overwhelming majority of 2,700 wounded and captured soldiers by Federal cavalrymen, many of whom were taken to the then named Breckinridge Military Hospital for treatment, many of which succumbed to their wounds. The hospital found itself in the middle of the conflict, treating both Federal and Confederate soldiers, leaving the floors stained with blood and the walls filled with the screams of suffering soldiers, like a never-ending crescendo of pain.
Stories from Marion Military Institute. I went to Marion in 2007 to 2008. We had various incidences throughout my time there, but one night in particular comes to mind. In the female barracks, I believe it was Lovelace, there was an incident where the female chaplain, a cadet captain, began speaking in strange and aggressive dialect, almost like she was speaking in tongues. Apparently, it took multiple women to hold her down and restrain her. I was in Delta Company barracks, and that same night we started having issues with our desk lamps turning on and off on their own, windows closing at a whim, and everyone was freaked out. I called my wrestling coach from back home and talked to him about it because he was a strong Christian mentor to me and I was scared. The next morning while we were in formation, that's when I learned about the incident at the female barracks. I never saw the chaplain again, and all of us were told not to discuss the events of that night. It was weird not only because of what had happened, but because of how leadership tried to sweep it under the rug.
One night as a cadet at MMI, I was trying to charge my phone, only to realize my cord wasn't working. I asked my friend down the hall if I could borrow his extra one until I got one that weekend on leave. He said sure, so we walked to his room. The second his light was flipped on, the desk lamp flew across the room and broke against the wall. It had little cubbies at the base of it, with desk supplies in it, so the pieces went everywhere. My buddy's roommate was laying down in the room napping when this happened. He was stunned as we were, and had no explanation except for what we saw. When we were cleaning up the mess, the guy who had been in the room was complaining about an itch on his leg, and looked to find 3 scratch marks on his leg. This was in the Echo Band Barracks at the time. I also heard a story from band company cadets about a little girl that they would see. A girl also had a ukulele in a case that would mysteriously be heard playing at times in the night.
Caleb, October 2nd, 2018. I currently am a C2 at MMI, with nothing out of the ordinary happening so far this year. However, last year, a few weeks after cresting, I started waking up every morning at 0300, as did many other cadets here in Wilkerson Barracks. Every night, it was something different. One night, I'd wake up to banging on my door, then hearing heavy bootsteps walk away. Another night, it would be banging and scraping from the 3rd floor, which is very haunted. One day, I heard banging coming from the 3rd floor, which remains locked pretty much all the time, unless work is being done up there. I was an idiot and decided to see what was going on, so I walked towards the stairwell. I felt heavier and heavier as I approached, but as soon as my foot hit the first step, it felt like my heart fell out of my chest. And that's as far as I got. All of this happened for about half a week straight, until Sunday when it was found out that cadets were using Ouija boards in the barracks. My friend found one in the hallway and thought it would be funny to kick it under the door of the room next to me. For at least a week, the guy in the room started looking pale, with his eyes dark like he hadn't slept for days. In the middle of the night, I heard things constantly being shifted around and dropped in his room. One day, on my way to class, I walked past his room, which is usually pretty shabby, and the entire room looked like it was put together by a colonel. When I looked in the top corner of his room, I saw an irregular shaped shadow that could not have possibly been there because the whole room was bright, except for that one spot. All these I have personally witnessed, and I am very sure MMI is haunted by both demons and ghosts alike.
Joan, September 27th, 2016. I am currently a cadet here, and I am in Wilkerson's Hall. I have had very eerie happenings occur while I've been here, from objects moving around to feeling like I'm being watched, to hearing people call my name in the middle of the night. Every night I sleep with my phone beside me and the charger connected to it. The wall outlet sits just underneath the bed, so to unplug it or plug it in, I have to reach my hand between the bed and the wall to get it. One night I woke up and felt something wrapped tightly around my neck. I reached up and realized that it was my charger. The end of my charger had been unplugged from the wall and wrapped around my neck 2 or 3 times while the other end was still attached to my phone. Also, a lot of us tend to wake up around 3 a.m. a lot. I've shared this with some of my friends here, and a lot of them have the same experience. 3 a.m. seems to have some significance, but I can't figure out why. The last thing I can think of is late at night you can sometimes hear footsteps dragging and banging on the abandoned floor above my floor. Very creepy stuff.
Jeff, 1995 to 1997. I attended MMI from 1995 to 1997. And I experienced some strange things around the campus. I was a boarding school student and didn't have a car, so I mostly stayed there on the weekends, and it was very boring. We would go explore the campus at night and frequently got under the chapel where there are some old abandoned rooms. There were some tunnels throughout the city that were used by the Confederate Army during the Civil War to fortify the town, but we were too scared to venture very far into them because they looked unsafe. Since we weren't allowed to smoke on campus, we were constantly on the lookout for faculty and staff walking around whenever we would try to sneak a smoke. We would sometimes hear the distinct sound of footsteps coming close to us, and we would immediately stomp out our cigarettes so we wouldn't get caught, only to find there was no one there. This happened on numerous occasions during my time at MMI. The chapel, the oldest building on campus, was used as an army hospital to treat wounded soldiers during the Battle of Selma, and many succumbed to their wounds. Once they died, they were immediately buried in a makeshift cemetery behind the chapel. Some cadets said they would randomly smell ether, which was used in the hospitals for no reason at all.
We thank you all for taking this journey with us, and hope to see you in the next one. Until next time, have a wonderful day.